Summer jobs are supposed to be carefree, a chance for teenagers to earn some money, maybe get a tan, spend time by the water. But for one 16-year-old girl in a small Massachusetts town, her summer job would become the setting for one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American history. A case so disturbing that it would launch the largest missing person search in Massachusetts history, devastate an entire community, and leave a family searching for answers for over 2 decades. This is the story of Molly Bish, June 27, 2000. It started like any other Tuesday morning in Warren, Massachusetts. A quiet rural town where everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where parents felt safe letting their kids ride bikes until dark, where doors were left unlocked, and where violent crime was almost unheard of. Molly Ann Bish, just 16 years old, woke up that morning to devastating news. One of her soccer teammates had been hit by a car and was in critical condition. Despite the emotional weight of this news, Molly had responsibilities. It was the first day of swimming lessons at Commons Pond, where she worked as a lifeguard, and children were counting on her. Molly was everything you'd want in a neighbor, a friend, a daughter, an honor roll student who had just completed her junior year of high school. She played soccer, basketball, and softball. Her sister Heather would later describe her as someone who loved sports, kids, and making people laugh. Her father said everyone had a Molly in their life. That girl who was your neighbor, your best friend, the one who lit up every room she entered. Funny and social, she was described as a blend of Lucy from I Love Lucy and Forrest Gump, bringing joy wherever she went. Her favorite quote was simple but powerful. I love life. Just 8 days earlier, Molly had started her new job as a lifeguard at Commons Pond, a small man-made recreational area surrounded by dense forest. Her older brother had held the same position before her, making it feel like a family tradition. It was the kind of summer job that seemed perfect for a responsible teenager like Molly. But what her family didn't know was that someone had already been watching. That morning, Molly's mother, Maggie, drove her to work. They stopped at a convenience store at 9:50 a.m. Security cameras captured the last image of Molly outside her home, grabbing bottles of water for her shift. At 9:56 a.m., they checked in at the Warren Police Department to pick up her two-way radio, standard equipment for the isolated lifeguard post. These small stops, these mundane details, would later become crucial pieces of a timeline that investigators would scrutinize endlessly. Then at 9:58 a.m., they arrived at Commons Pond. But Maggie was on edge. She had every reason to be. The day before, on June 26th, something had happened that left her deeply unsettled. When Maggie accompanied Molly to the pond for her 7th day of work, they noticed a white car parked right next to them in the small dirt parking lot. A man sat inside, smoking a cigarette. Maggie felt immediate discomfort about his presence. She described the vehicle as an older white sedan with rust on the side. The man himself was middle-aged with a prominent mustache. But it was what happened next that would haunt Maggie forever. As Maggie and Molly got out of their car, Maggie looked at the man, trying to assess the situation. She gave him what she called a teacher's stare, that authoritative look meant to make someone uncomfortable, to make them leave. But instead of looking away or leaving, the man boldly stared back. He squinted at her with a cocky, almost challenging expression. He kept smoking and didn't seem to care about her presence at all. The stare down lasted an uncomfortably long time. Fearing for Molly's safety, Maggie made a decision. She actually got out of her car and walked down to talk to Molly at the lifeguard post, killing time, waiting for the man to leave. After nearly 20 minutes, he finally drove away. Maggie told Molly about the strange man. She warned her to be careful. But what could they really do? It was a public parking area. The man hadn't technically done anything illegal. He was just there, watching, waiting. The next morning, June 27th, Magi was relieved when they pulled into the parking lot and the white car was nowhere to be seen. Instead, There was a sand truck from a local company unloading sand for the beach. When Magi saw this familiar truck, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. Molly wouldn't be alone. There were workers nearby. Everything seemed normal. Safe. Molly grabbed her things, rushed toward her lifeguard post, turned back and called out, "I love you, Mom." Those would be the last words Molly Bish would ever hear her daughter speak. Molly set up her station. She placed her backpack on the bench, removed her shoes, draped her towel on the back of her chair, and placed her water bottle in her shoe. Everything was in its place. By 10:03 a.m., just 5 minutes after being dropped off, Molly Bish had vanished. At 10:20 a.m., Sandra Woodworth arrived at the pond with her children for their swimming lesson. The lifeguard chair was empty. At first, she thought maybe Molly had gone to the bathroom or was running late. But as more families arrived and time passed, concern turned to alarm. One of the mothers rifled through Molly's backpack to grab her whistle so someone could fill in as lifeguard. Everything was there. Her belongings, her shoes, her first aid kit, which they noticed was open. But Molly was gone. At around 11:20 a.m., Molly's boss, Ed Fett, called the Warren Police Department to report her missing. At 1:06 p.m., 3 hours after dropping her daughter off at what should have been a normal day at work, Maggie Bish received the call that would shatter her world forever. Molly was missing. The initial response was, frankly, catastrophic. Police first theorized that Molly might have drowned while on duty, despite her family insisting that made no sense. Molly preferred pool swimming and was an experienced, responsible lifeguard. She would never have left her post to go swimming alone. But even more damaging was the decision not to treat the scene as a potential crime scene. It wasn't secured. Hundreds of people, desperate to help, walked through the area, potentially destroying crucial evidence. Helicopters circled overhead. Divers searched the pond. Dogs tracked scents that led both east and west from the pond to Reed Street and Bemis Road, but then went cold. Within hours, what started as a drowning investigation transformed into something far more sinister. This wasn't an accident. Molly hadn't wandered off. The evidence suggested something that made everyone's blood run cold. She had been taken. The search for Molly Bish quickly grew into the most extensive and expensive search for a missing person in Massachusetts history. Neighboring communities sent volunteers, state police mobilized. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew grid patterns over the surrounding woods. Search and rescue dogs worked around the clock. Flyers with Molly's smiling face appeared on every telephone pole, in every storefront, in every community within 100 miles. The media descended on Warren, turning the small town into the center of a media firestorm. But despite all of this, despite thousands of man-hours, despite the desperation of an entire community, there was no trace of Molly Bish. Investigators developed a theory about what might have happened in those crucial minutes. They believed someone could have approached Molly pretending to be injured, asking for supplies from her first aid kit. When Molly bent down to open the kit to help them, she was attacked. This would explain why the kit was found open and why her shoes were left behind as if she'd been grabbed suddenly. Cummins Pond sat at a fork in the road. One direction led to a cemetery, the other into dense woods. Police believed she might have been dragged up the road toward the cemetery, where a vehicle could easily escape without being noticed. But this was all speculation. They had no witnesses, no concrete evidence, nothing but theories and a missing girl. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, Maggie Bish remembered something that had been gnawing at her. That man in the white car. She told police about him, about how he'd stared at her, about how uncomfortable he'd made her feel. A police sketch was created based on Maggie's description. A middle-aged white male with dark hair and a prominent mustache. A face that would be distributed across the country. A face that thousands of people would claim to recognize, but nobody could name. The man in the white car became the focus of the investigation. Witnesses came forward. The sand truck driver reported seeing a white car in the parking lot just moments before Molly and Maggie arrived that morning. Another, Witness saw a white car near a car wash at the base of Commons Pond Road around the time of Molly's disappearance. Police searched over 100 white cars in the area, but the mysterious man remained a ghost, vanishing just as completely as Molly had. John and Maggie Bish poured every ounce of their energy into finding their daughter. John made a direct appeal to whoever took Molly. "We will never stop searching for her, and we will never stop searching for you." The anger in his voice was palpable, an anger he said would drive him forever. Maggie channeled her grief into action, creating awareness programs, pushing for legislative changes, doing everything she could to prevent another family from experiencing this nightmare. But behind all the public strength, they were parents living in absolute torment, not knowing if their daughter was alive or dead, suffering or at peace. The investigation pursued several leads. Molly's boyfriend at the time, Steve Lucas, was questioned but cleared. Her boss, Ed Fett, was also investigated and ruled out. Every man in Warren who owned a white car found themselves under scrutiny. Tips poured in from across the country. Psychics called claiming to know where Molly was. Conspiracy theories spread, but nothing led anywhere. Molly had simply vanished, as if she'd never existed at all. Then, in late 2002, more than 2 years after Molly's disappearance, a hunter was in the woods of Palmer, Massachusetts, an area known as Whiskey Hill, about 5 miles from Commons Pond. He noticed something unusual, a piece of blue fabric partially buried in the underbrush. It looked like it might be a bathing suit, similar to the blue Nike one-piece that Molly had been wearing when she disappeared. But the hunter didn't report it immediately. He thought about it, wondered if it was important, but ultimately did nothing. It wasn't until May 2003, 6 months later, that he mentioned his discovery to someone who finally contacted police. On May 12, 2003, investigators launched a massive search of the Whiskey Hill area. Over 200 searchers combed through the challenging terrain in a shoulder-to-shoulder formation, searching every inch of the dense forest. The area was remote, heavily wooded, the kind of place where you could hide something and it might never be found. For days they searched. And then, on June 3, 2003, they made the discovery that the Bish family had been dreading for nearly 3 years. Human remains, skeletal remains. On June 9, 2003, those remains were positively identified through forensic analysis. They belonged to Molly Ann Bish. The missing person case officially became a murder investigation. Molly's family had hoped against hope that somehow, somewhere, she was still alive. That hope died on June 9, 2003. Their daughter, their sister, their friend was gone, and someone had taken her from them. The blue bathing suit fabric the hunter had seen was confirmed to be Molly's. Along with her remains, investigators found other pieces of evidence in that wooded area, 267 pieces in total that are still stored at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. Based on the condition of the remains and the evidence at the scene, investigators believed Molly had died the same day she was abducted. Though they couldn't determine an exact cause of death due to the condition of the remains, they were certain this was murder. She had been taken to that remote location and killed. Her body left in those woods for nearly 3 years. Molly was laid to rest on what would have been her 20th birthday, August 2, 2003. Her gravestone now stands just yards from the pond where she was last seen alive, a permanent reminder of a life cut tragically short, of a case that remains unsolved. But the question still burns. Who did this? Over the years, several suspects have emerged, each one promising to be the breakthrough the case desperately needed, but each one ultimately leading nowhere. The first significant suspect was Rodney Stanger. In 2009, authorities began investigating him after a tip came in. Stanger had lived in Southbridge, Massachusetts, near Warren, for more than 20 years. Here's what made him interesting. He was known to fish at Commons Pond and hunt in the woods where Molly's body was found. He had access to a white car similar to the one described by Maggie Bish. And perhaps most damning, he closely matched the physical description Maggie had provided of the man in the parking lot. Even more suspicious, Stanger moved to Florida about a year after Molly's murder. Then in 2008, he killed his girlfriend of 20 years, Crystal Morrison. It was Morrison's sister who alerted Massachusetts authorities about Stanger, wondering if he might be connected to other crimes. In 2010, Stanger was convicted of killing Morrison and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Investigators questioned him about both Molly's case and also about the 1993 murder of 10-year-old Holly Pieranen, another young girl who had disappeared from a nearby town, a case that bore eerie similarities to Molly's. But despite all the circumstantial evidence, Stanger was never charged in either case. The evidence just wasn't there. In a bizarre and haunting coincidence, young Molly had actually written a letter of hope to Holly Pieranen's family back in 1993, 7 years before her own disappearance. Both girls were the same age when Holly was murdered. Both were taken from small Massachusetts towns. Both found in wooded areas. The similarities were chilling, leading investigators to wonder if the same person was responsible for both crimes. Then, in November 2011, another suspect emerged, Gerald Battistoni. Battistoni was a convicted rapist who had served time in prison for repeatedly raping a teenage girl in the early 1990s. He had a criminal record dating back to 1980. What made Battistoni a person of interest? He had been in the area where Molly's body was found. He busy resembled the composite sketch of the man in the white car. And according to his second wife, on the day Molly disappeared, Battistoni was working on their white Chevy and had taken it for a drive through the Warren area. He was also familiar with the Whiskey Hill area where Molly's remains were discovered. The Bish family, working with the private investigator, pushed for DNA testing on the evidence collected from the crime scene. In 2013, some evidence was sent to a lab in Texas for analysis. Then, in November 2011, after newspaper articles publicly identified Battistoni as a potential suspect in both Molly's murder and Holly Pieranen's murder, he attempted suicide in prison. He died on November 11, 2014, at the age of 52, taking whatever secrets he had to the grave. The DNA testing was inconclusive. Once again, the case went cold. But the story doesn't end there. In June 2014, a private investigator made another discovery in the Palmer Woods, not far from where Molly's remains had been found. Partially buried beneath a log was a bag. Inside the bag was a pair of plaid boxer shorts, similar to the ones Molly had been wearing when she disappeared. Was this another piece of evidence? Had it been there all along, missed during the initial searches, or had someone placed it there more recently? The answer remains unclear, and investigators have never publicly confirmed whether the shorts were definitively Molly's. Then, in June 2021, 21 years after Molly's disappearance, the Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early made a stunning announcement. He named a new person of interest in the case, Frank Sumner Sr. And this time, the DA didn't use the term person of interest lightly. He called Sumner a suspect. That's significant. Prosecutors don't typically use that language unless they have substantial evidence. So, who was Frank Sumner? He was a convicted sex offender with a long and disturbing criminal history that included rape and kidnapping. He had operated several auto body shops in Worcester and surrounding towns, including areas near Warren. And here's what made him the focus of the investigation. He looked remarkably similar to the composite sketch that had been created from Molly Bish's description of the man in the white car. The resemblance was haunting. When Magi saw Sumner's photo for the first time in 2021, she said it gave her a fear she didn't want to feel, calling him the most scariest one of all. The tip that broke the case wide open involved that white car. Sources told investigators that they had seen a white car matching the description in one of the auto body shops where Sumner worked. Working at an auto shop, Sumner would have had access to multiple vehicles, including the ability to borrow customers' cars. The old white sedan with rust on the side that Maggie remembered so vividly could have been any number of vehicles passing through his shops. But there was a major problem. Frank Sumner, died in 2016, 4 years before he was publicly named as a suspect. He could never face trial. He could never be questioned. He could never confess. All investigators could do was try to prove posthumously that he was responsible. In December 2021, investigators traveled to an Ohio prison to collect DNA from Sumner's son, Francis Sumner Jr., hoping that familial DNA might provide the evidence they needed to definitively link Sumner Sr. to the crime. The DNA testing was conducted, and the Bish family waited with bated breath for results that could finally give them closure after more than 2 decades of torment. But in July 2022, the devastating news came. The DNA wasn't a match. Another dead end. Another crushing disappointment. Frank Sumner remains a person of interest, with Dear Early stating publicly that he still believes Sumner is connected to Molly's murder, but without definitive DNA evidence, the case remains officially unsolved. Today, 25 years after Molly Bish vanished from her lifeguard post at Commons Pond, her murder remains one of Massachusetts' most haunting unsolved cases. There are still 267 pieces of physical evidence stored at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in Sudbury. With advances in DNA technology occurring rapidly, investigators continue to conduct new testing on clothing and other evidence, hoping that modern forensic science can finally provide the answers that traditional investigation couldn't. The Bish family has never given up. Maggie, now dealing with the 25th anniversary of her daughter's disappearance, says they remain optimistic that someday the case will be solved. Heather, Molly's older sister, has become a fierce advocate for changes in how DNA evidence is used in criminal investigations. She's pushed for familial DNA legislation, for better resources, for new investigators to be assigned to the case. In 2022, frustrated by what she perceived as a lack of progress and communication from the Worcester County District Attorney's Office, Heather formally requested that the case be moved to the Hampden County District Attorney's Office, since Molly's remains were found in Hampden County. Her letter cited years of frustration, communication issues, and what she called tunnel vision in the investigation. The Bish family has transformed their grief into action. In 2004, John and Maggie founded the Molly Bish Center and Foundation in collaboration with Anna Maria College. Their goal was to establish safety awareness programs, create ID cards for children, and assist investigators in child abduction cases. They've helped photograph, fingerprint, and create identification cards for over 46,000 children. They launched the first Missing Children's Day in Massachusetts and played a crucial role in pushing for the National Amber Alert Act. Molly's legacy lives on through the thousands of children who might be safer because of the work her family has done. But none of this brings Molly back. None of this erases the pain of not knowing exactly what happened in those final moments. Heather Bish describes grief as coming in waves, like a tsunami. There are the dates, birthdays, Christmas, the day they found Molly's skull, the anniversary of her abduction. Each one brings fresh waves of pain. The framework of their lives was forever changed on June 27, 2000. Maggie Bish, now in her 70s, still drives past Commons Pond regularly. She still remembers dropping Molly off that morning, hearing her daughter's voice calling out, "I love you, Mom." She still remembers the man in the white car, his cocky stare, the rust on the door, the cigarette smoke. She blames herself, wondering what she could have done differently, even though there was nothing she could have done. How could she have known? How could anyone have known? Every year on June 27th, the Bish family holds a candlelight vigil at the Warrentown gazebo, followed by a walk to Commons Pond. Community members gather to remember Molly, to show their support for the family, and to keep the case in the public eye. Because that's what's needed in cold cases. Public pressure, continued attention, someone somewhere who might know something finally finding the courage to come forward. The investigation remains officially active. Anyone with information about the abduction and murder of Molly Bish is urged to call the Massachusetts State Police tip line. The number is displayed on flyers that still hang in Warren. Callers can remain anonymous. Investigators have received more than 6,700 leads and tips over the decades. Most have led nowhere, but they continue to follow every single one, because you never know which tip might be the one that breaks the case wide open. So what really happened on that June morning in 2000? The most likely scenario, based on all available evidence, is this. Someone had been watching Molly. Perhaps they'd seen her at the pond during her first week of work. Perhaps they'd driven by multiple times, studying her routine, learning when she arrived, when she was alone. The man in the white car the day before Molly's disappearance was likely her killer, conducting surveillance, planning his attack. When he saw that Maggie dropped Molly off alone on June 27th, with just a sand truck nearby and no swimming lessons scheduled to start for another 20 minutes, he saw his window of opportunity. He may have approached Molly pretending to be injured or in distress, asking for help from her first aid kit. The moment she bent down to help, he attacked. He likely had a vehicle waiting nearby, possibly parked at the cemetery that was just a short distance away. He grabbed Molly, possibly at knife point or gunpoint, and forced her to the vehicle. Within minutes, maybe even seconds, she was gone. He drove her to the remote wooded area of Whiskey Hill, where he murdered her and left her body in the underbrush, believing it would never be found. This theory explains the opened first aid kit, the shoes left behind, the lack of screams or struggle that anyone reported hearing, and the fact that she disappeared within such a narrow window of time. It was planned, it was deliberate, and it was executed with terrifying efficiency. But here's what we don't know, and what haunts investigators and the Bish family to this day. Was Frank Sumner really responsible, despite the DNA evidence not matching? Was it Rodney Stanger or Gerald Battistoni, both of whom had connections to the area and matching descriptions? Was it someone else entirely? Someone who has never been on investigators' radar? Was this the same person who killed Holly Piirainen 7 years earlier? And perhaps most disturbing of all, is Molly's killer still alive, still free, maybe watching the news coverage of the anniversary, knowing he got away with it? 25 years is a long time to wait for justice. It's a quarter of a century of birthdays Molly never celebrated, of graduations she never attended, of a life she never got to live. She would be 41 years old now. She might have been married, had children of her own, pursued a career. Instead, her life ended at 16, cut short by an act of unspeakable evil on what should have been just another summer day at work. The Bish family holds on to hope. They have to, because giving up hope means accepting that they'll never know the truth, never see justice for Molly. Maggie says Molly's love continues through the outpouring of support they've received, through the lives they've helped protect with their foundation, through the memory of a girl who loved life and brought joy to everyone around her. Heather Bish said it best. It is hope that has carried us forward all this time. Hope that forensic technology will advance enough to provide definitive answers. Hope that someone who knows something will finally come forward. Hope that Molly's killer will be identified, even if they can never face earthly justice. Hope that the truth, no matter how painful, will finally set this family free from decades of agonizing uncertainty. If you have any information about the disappearance and murder of Molly Ann Bish, please contact the Massachusetts State Police tip line at 508-453-7575. You can remain anonymous. Even the smallest detail, something that seemed insignificant at the time, could be the piece that finally solves this case. Someone out there knows something. Someone saw something. Someone has carried this secret for 25 years. Now is the time to speak up. For John, Maggie, Heather, and John Jr., for the community of Warren that has never forgotten, for the thousands of children whose lives have been protected by the foundation Molly's family created in her memory, for everyone who believes that justice should never expire. No matter how much time has passed, the search for answers continues. Because Molly Bish deserves justice, and her family deserves peace. And until both are achieved, this case will never truly be closed. The lifeguard chair at Cummins Pond sits empty now, a silent memorial to a life taken too soon and a mystery that still haunts Massachusetts. On warm summer days, children still swim there, perhaps not knowing the tragic history of that place. But Molly's family knows. They'll never forget, and they'll never stop fighting for answers. Because as Maggie Bish promised her daughter, "We will never forget you, Molly. We will never let you down." This is the story of Molly Bish, a beloved daughter, sister and friend, a girl who loved life, a 16-year-old whose promising future was stolen in a matter of minutes, and a case that, 25 years later, still demands justice. Summer jobs are supposed June 30th, 1999, a cornfield in St. Charles, Missouri. A body is discovered. The man has been dead for days. In his pockets, police find 2 handwritten notes covered in strange symbols, letters, and codes that nobody can decipher. Not the FBI, not the CIA, not the world's best cryptographers. 25 years later, these notes remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history, and the answer to what they say might reveal who killed Ricky McCormick. This is the story of a murder, an unbreakable code, and the question that haunts investigators. What did Ricky McCormick know that got him killed? And why did he write it down in a code so complex that even the most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the world can't crack it? Let me take you back to where this begins. Because understanding Ricky McCormick's encrypted notes means understanding who Ricky was, how he died, and why these seemingly random scratchings might be the key to everything. Ricky McCormick was born June 14, 1958, in St. Louis, Missouri. He grew up poor, the kind of poverty that grinds people down. Limited education, limited opportunities. By all accounts, Ricky struggled academically. He dropped out of high school, never held a steady job for long, in and out of trouble with the law for minor offenses, petty theft, nothing violent, just a guy trying to survive on the margins. Ricky had health problems, serious ones. He was chronically ill with various conditions that required regular medical attention. He was on disability, living in subsidized housing, getting by on government assistance. His life was small, contained. He wasn't wealthy, wasn't connected to anything big or important, just another face in the system. But there was something unusual about Ricky McCormick. Something that didn't fit the profile of a high school dropout with no formal education. Ricky had a hobby. He wrote in code. Complex, sophisticated code that nobody could understand. Not his family, not his friends, nobody. His family knew about this habit. They'd see him scribbling in notebooks, strange combinations of letters and numbers. When they'd ask him what he was writing, Ricky would smile and say it was his own language, his private thoughts. Nobody else needed to understand it. Some people thought it was nonsense. Random symbols meant to look important. Others thought maybe Ricky was mentally ill, that the codes were delusions, meaningless scratching from a troubled mind. But looking at the notes, there's clear structure, clear patterns. This isn't random, this is deliberate. June 1999. Ricky McCormick is 41 years old. He's living in St. Louis, still struggling with health issues, still getting by on disability. On June 25th, Ricky is last seen alive. He tells his family he's going to get some medical tests done, needs to see doctors about his ongoing health problems. He leaves home, and that's the last time anyone who knows him sees Ricky McCormick alive. 5 days pass. Nobody hears from Ricky. His family starts to worry. Ricky might not have much, but he stays in touch. He calls. He comes around. 5 days of silence isn't normal. They try calling him. No answer. They check his apartment. He's not there. They report him missing on June 27th. 3 days later, on June 30th, 1999, a farmer is working in his cornfield in St. Charles County, Missouri. It's about 20 miles west of St. Louis, rural area. Lots of farmland. As the farmer is working, he spots something unusual near the edge of his field. A body. He calls police immediately. St. Charles County Sheriff's deputies respond. They find the body of an African American male. He's been dead for several days. Decomposition has started. The body is lying face up, fully clothed. No obvious signs of trauma. No gunshot wounds. No stab wounds. No signs of a struggle. The man appears to have just collapsed and died right there in the cornfield. Police search the body for identification. They find a wallet with an ID, Ricky McCormick, the missing man from Street Louis. They've found him. But how did he die? And what was he doing in a cornfield 20 miles from home? Here's where it gets interesting. Police find 2 pieces of paper in Ricky's pockets. Both are covered in handwritten notes. And the notes are unlike anything the investigating officers have ever seen. Combinations of letters, numbers, dashes, and symbols. No clear words, no obvious meaning. Just line after line of encrypted text. The first note is smaller, contains several lines of code. The second note is longer, more complex. Multiple sections separated by what appear to be markers or dividers. Both notes are written in the same hand, same style, same type of code. Police photograph the notes, bag them as evidence, and they start trying to figure out what they say. Because maybe, just maybe, these notes will tell them why Ricky McCormick ended up dead in a cornfield. The autopsy reveals something surprising. Ricky McCormick died of natural causes, heart failure. His chronic health problems finally caught up with him. There's no evidence of foul play, no poison, no trauma, no homicide. Ricky's heart gave out. So the case seems straightforward, right? Sick man dies of natural causes. Tragic, but not mysterious. Except for one problem. How did Ricky McCormick get to that cornfield? Ricky didn't own a car. He didn't drive. He was 20 miles from home in a remote rural area. How did he get there? Did someone drive him? If so, who and why? If Ricky was going to get medical tests as he told his family, why did he end up in a cornfield in another county? And then there are those notes. What do they say? Are they relevant to his death? Or just random writings from a man who liked codes? Charles County Sheriff's investigators try to decode the notes. They bring in experts, local academics, people who work in cryptography. Nobody can crack them. The symbols and letters seem to follow patterns, but nobody can figure out the key to unlock them. In 2011, 12 years after Ricky's death, the FBI does something unprecedented. They release the encrypted notes to the public, post them on their website, and ask for help. The FBI's Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit, one of the most sophisticated code-breaking teams in the world, has been unable to decipher Ricky McCormick's notes. They're stumped. So, they're crowdsourcing the solution. The FBI makes a public statement. They say these notes might be connected to a homicide investigation, that cracking the code could provide leads in an unsolved murder. Wait, murder? But Ricky died of natural causes, right? Here's what the FBI knows that the public didn't. Ricky McCormick wasn't just some random guy who died in a field. In the months before his death, Ricky had been questioned by police about several crimes. He was a person of interest in multiple investigations. Nothing was ever proven. Ricky was never charged. But police had their eye on him. Some investigators believe Ricky was involved in something criminal. Maybe drugs. Maybe something else. And these notes might contain information about those activities. Names, dates, locations. Evidence that someone wanted buried. Evidence worth killing for. But wait, Ricky died of natural causes. The autopsy was clear. So how could it be murder? Here's the theory some investigators have. Ricky didn't end up in that cornfield by accident. Someone drove him there. Maybe to intimidate him. Maybe to interrogate him. Maybe to kill him. But before they could do anything, Ricky's heart gave out. He died right there. Natural causes. But he wouldn't have been in that location if not for someone else. So is it murder? Or just suspicious circumstances around a natural death? And those notes, were they in Ricky's possession when he died? Or were they planted? Some investigators think the notes might have been placed in his pockets after death. That they're evidence of something. Instructions, confessions, a record of crimes. Others think Ricky wrote the notes before he died. That they contain information he knew was dangerous. That's why he wrote them in code, to protect himself or to protect someone else. Let's look at the notes themselves, because they are fascinating and deeply frustrating. The first note contains several lines. It starts with Alpus NCBE and continues with similar combinations. There are dashes, numbers, groups of letters that seem randomly arranged but have a clear structure. The second note is longer. It's divided into sections. Each section seems to be its own message or entry. There are recurring patterns. Certain letter combinations appear multiple times. The note ends with what appears to be a date or code, 29SE and 293SE. Cryptographers have analyzed these notes extensively. They've looked for substitution ciphers, where each letter represents another letter. They've looked for transposition ciphers, where letters are rearranged according to a key. They've looked for book codes, where numbers reference specific pages and words in a text. Nothing works. The notes resist every standard cryptographic technique. Either Ricky McCormick created a completely original encryption method, or the notes are so personalized that only he could ever decode them. Some experts think the notes use what's called an idiosyncratic cipher, meaning the code is based on Ricky's personal shorthand, his own mental associations, things only he would know. If that's true, the notes might be impossible to crack without knowing Ricky's thought process. But here's what's interesting. Despite being declared unsolvable by the FBI, people have claimed to crack parts of the code. Amateur cryptographers, hobbyists, people obsessed with the mystery, and some of their solutions are compelling. One theory suggests the notes contain phonetic spellings of places in Street Louis, that NCBE could be Nasiriyah Street, phonetically spelled. That other combinations reference locations, addresses, or landmarks. If true, the notes might be directions, a map to something. Another theory suggests the notes are a ledger, records of drug transactions or other criminal activity. The numbers represent quantities or amounts. The letters represent people or products. The sections divide different deals or dates. A third theory is darker. Some believe the notes describe crimes, violent crimes, that Ricky witnessed or participated in something terrible, that he wrote it down in code to have evidence but keep himself safe. And when someone found out he had this information, they killed him, or tried to before his heart gave out. The FBI has never confirmed any of these theories. They've said that various amateur solutions have been examined and none have been verified. The notes remain unsolved. Here's what makes this case so haunting. Ricky McCormick had limited education. He wasn't a trained cryptographer. He didn't have a background in mathematics or computer science. He was a poor, sick man living on disability. Yet he created a code that the world's most advanced intelligence agencies can't crack. How? Some people think that's proof the notes are meaningless, that they're just random scribbling designed to look important, that Ricky was delusional or playing a game. But if they're meaningless, why did the FBI spend years trying to crack them? Why release them publicly? Why call them potentially related to a homicide? The FBI doesn't waste resources on gibberish. They believe these notes mean something. They believe cracking them could solve a crime. The question is, what crime? Ricky's death or something else entirely? Let's talk about Ricky's family. After his death, they were interviewed extensively. They confirmed that Ricky had always written in code, that this was normal behavior for him. He'd been doing it for years. They'd seen dozens of similar notes. He kept notebooks full of this encrypted writing. But here's the tragic part. After Ricky died, his family cleaned out his apartment. They threw away most of his possessions, including all those notebooks, all those other coded messages. The only examples of Ricky's encryption that survive are the 2 notes found in his pockets. Everything else is gone, lost forever. If investigators had access to more examples of Ricky's writing, they might be able to identify patterns, crack the code through repetition and analysis. But without that comparative material, these 2 notes exist in isolation, and that makes them nearly impossible to decode definitively. Some family members said Ricky told them what some of his codes meant, that he'd occasionally translate portions for them. They remember him explaining that certain combinations represented family members' names. that others were places he'd been. But nobody wrote down these translations, nobody kept records, and memories fade. After 25 years, those family members can't remember the specific codes or their meanings. One family member said something intriguing. They said Ricky once told them he wrote in code because he knew things that could get him in trouble, things other people didn't want known. Was this paranoia? Was Ricky delusional, imagining himself important and in danger? Or did Ricky actually know something worth encrypting? Let's consider the possibility that Ricky was involved in something criminal, not as a mastermind, but as a witness, as someone who saw something he shouldn't have seen. In that world, information is currency. It's also dangerous. Writing down what you know in a code protects you. It's insurance. If something happens to me, these notes exist. Someone will figure them out. The truth will come out. But that only works if someone can crack the code. If the code is too personal, too idiosyncratic, it dies with you. And maybe that's what happened. Ricky wrote down something important, something that could have solved a crime or exposed someone, but he died before anyone could decode it, and now it's lost forever. There's another angle here. What if the notes aren't about crime at all? What if they're personal? Private thoughts Ricky didn't want others to read? Maybe he had relationships or experiences he wanted to record but keep secret. Maybe the notes are a diary, an encrypted journal of a man's inner life. If that's true, then decoding them is less about solving a crime and more about invading privacy. Is it ethical to crack someone's private thoughts just because they wrote them in code? Some people argue Ricky's dead. He has no expectation of privacy anymore. Others say everyone deserves to keep their secrets even after death. Over the years, hundreds of amateur cryptographers have attempted to crack Ricky McCormick's notes. Online forums are dedicated to it. People have spent thousands of hours analyzing every letter, every symbol, every pattern. Some claim to have solved portions, others say the whole thing is a hoax or meaningless. One of the most detailed attempts came from a computer scientist who used frequency analysis and pattern recognition algorithms. He claimed to have identified a system where letters represent phonetic sounds rather than traditional alphabet letters. Under his decryption, parts of the notes reference locations in street, Louis and dates in the 1990 seconds. But the FBI has never confirmed this solution. Another attempt came from a linguist who suggested the notes might be in a constructed language, something Ricky invented entirely, with its own grammar and syntax. If true, decoding it would require understanding the rules Ricky created. And without a key or dictionary, that's nearly impossible. The most disturbing theory comes from criminal profilers who've studied the case. They believe Ricky was murdered, that the natural causes determination was wrong or incomplete. They point to the location where the body was found, middle of nowhere, no reason for Ricky to be there. They suggest Ricky was killed somewhere else and his body dumped in the cornfield, that the notes were taken from his home and planted on his body to mislead investigators. Under this theory, the killer knew about Ricky's coded notes, took them as a trophy or to throw police off the trail. When police found the encrypted notes on the body, they'd waste time trying to decode them instead of looking for real evidence. It's misdirection. A red herring left by someone clever enough to manipulate an investigation. This theory requires a sophisticated killer, someone who knew Ricky, knew about his habits, knew about the codes, and that narrows the suspect pool considerably. But without evidence of homicide, this remains speculation. In 2011, when the FBI released the notes publicly, they received thousands of tips, people claiming to have solved the code, people reporting similar coded messages, people with theories about what the symbols mean. FBI analysts reviewed every credible submission. None provided the breakthrough they were hoping for. The FBI's public statement said they believed the notes were written up to 3 days before Ricky's death, that they represent Ricky's final thoughts or activities. But how do they know this? What evidence dates the notes to those specific days? The FBI has never released that information. As of 2024, 25 years after Ricky McCormick's death, his encrypted notes remain unsolved. They sit in FBI files, posted on their website, available for anyone to examine. A challenge, a mystery, a puzzle that has defeated the best minds in cryptography. Some people think the notes will never be solved. That without more context, more examples of Ricky's writing, more information about his life and activities, there simply isn't enough data to crack the code. The key died with Ricky. Others remain hopeful. They believe that somewhere in those lines of letters and numbers is a pattern, a breakthrough waiting to be discovered. All it takes is the right perspective, the right approach, the right mind to see what everyone else has missed. And then, there are those who think the entire thing is a distraction, that the notes are meaningless, that Ricky wasn't involved in anything criminal, that his death was exactly what it appeared to be, a sick man whose heart gave out. The notes are just a quirk, a hobby, nothing more. But if that's true, why does the FBI still list this as an unsolved case? Why keep the notes public? Why continue to accept tips and theories? The FBI doesn't do that for nothing. They believe there's something here, something worth finding. June 30th, 1999. A body is discovered in a cornfield. In the pockets are 2 notes covered in unbreakable code. 25 years later, those notes have defeated the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and thousands of amateur cryptographers around the world. What did Ricky McCormick write? What secrets are encrypted in those lines of seemingly random letters? Was it evidence of a crime? A personal diary? Directions to something valuable? Or just the private thoughts of a man who wanted to keep his words to himself? We may never know. The code may remain unbroken forever. And Ricky McCormick, a poor, sick man who died alone in a cornfield, will have created the most enduring mystery in modern cryptography. If you're watching this and think you can crack the code, the notes are publicly available on the FBI's website. Thousands have tried. All have failed. But maybe you'll be different. Maybe you'll see what nobody else has seen. Maybe you'll finally unlock the secrets that died with Ricky McCormick. Or maybe, just maybe, some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. Some codes are meant to stay unbroken. And some secrets go to the grave with the people who held them. That's the story of Ricky McCormick's encrypted notes. A mystery wrapped in a code, wrapped in a death that might not be what it seems. 25 years later, we're no closer to the truth than we were the day those notes were found. And perhaps that's exactly what